Okay. This is a video I strongly recommend you to watch, and I basically never say that, by the way. Let's talk about prime lenses. At first, let's recognize, why would you buy a prime lens? And this is a 35mm prime. A lot of them are pretty damn expensive. You've got a mid-range zoom lens, 24 to 70. Or in the case of a DX crop sensor, the 16 to 55, or the 17 to 55 Nikkor. Now, why would you spend a lot of money on an expensive, most of them are quite expensive, especially the modern ones, a really expensive prime lens, above 35mm? A lot of people don't realize that optics were mostly perfected long before photography came along for many different things. There have been a lot of improvements in lenses. However, not in prime lenses, no. At 35mm and above. In wide angle and ultra wides, there have been serious improvements. Talking about below 35mm. So, areas where we've actually seen improvements on primes, below 35mm. Below. Why, sure, we've got autofocus tracking and we have optical image stabilization. Those things don't have anything to do with the actual image that is plopped onto your sensor, or in the case of film, onto the silver halide emulsion. Sure it does. If I take a blurry picture, then then that's very important. Well, yeah, of course it is, but I'm talking about the actual true output of the lens. I'm not talking about your delirium tremors when you're actually holding the camera. I'm talking about what the lens could actually drop on the sensor. We're not talking about shake. So autofocus and image stabilization are not specifically pertinent to the output of the lens. Some of the richest people in the world, as far as professional photographers, why don't you ask some of those idiots? Well, they're not idiots. They're some of the most highly acclaimed photographers on earth. Why don't you ask some of those people that you think are idiots why they're using a 60-year-old lens? Like, why are you using that, man? You got money? It's like these people can call up any lens company. This is a famous photographer XYZ. Please send me that new. They don't even have to pay for it. They could afford it, but they don't even have to pay for it. It's like, why are you using that old shit lens? It's because it's the best lens there is. I've tried lots of other stuff, it's not as good. There are a lot of measure-baiting morons out there that think modern is better. And it is in many cases, in some aspects of lens design. Some! Not all. Below 35mm in primes, yes, there have been significant improvements. Wide angles and ultra-wides got much better. The autofocus capabilities and the zoom capabilities have gotten drastically. I mean, you look at a 1960s zoom lens, like, whoa, damn, that sucks. A lot of stuff is bad about it. Resolution, yeah. So those have drastically improved. What has not improved, and you better listen closely, is prime lenses between 35mm and up. Okay? Hardcore, undeniable fact. Now, I've got a link below. I'd like you to copy it. I'd like you to debate me on it if you want. To come back and attack me on it. But check the link below. Okay? It's a link. It's a screen grab of a little thing that I wrote. I'm going to read it to you. And I want you to beat the hell out of me with it. Use this as a sledgehammer. Let's see how much you think you can penetrate through this. As far as, there's a hole in this. I found a hole. No, there's no holes in this. So spread this to other people, but first try to understand it yourself. Okay? And then try to poke holes in it. I feel so happy if you would like to try to poke holes in it. Okay? So why the hell, let's just assume this is an expensive prime, which is actually not. Most modern primes are rather expensive. That's fine. A lot of them don't have vibration control. Some of them do. It's okay, no big deal. Fast autofocus tracking. If it's for sports, action, and wildlife, it's important. If it's not, who gives a shit? You have issues with your portraiture, or are your landscapes moving? No, they're not. So you have no issues with those. So let's go over this, and I want you to attack me with what I've said here. Okay, and the link is below for you to read. You can redesign a modern prime lens, or just redesign a prime lens to dial out basically all or most all of the chromatic aberration, potential flare, or the demonstrable part of flare. The distortion and likewise increased corner-to-corner resolving power, which people today have this erotic fixation. How good is it, like right in the ass corner of the image? It's like, really? I don't remember any photographers, for the past 40 years that were bitching about fuzzy corners. They weren't. They just were not. They weren't. It's like, that's why we crop, Dial out the corner-to-corner resolving power by adding more corrective lens elements. Well, that's nice. However, in so doing, it is absolutely necessary, undeniably so, to wreak havoc upon the divine characteristics of the native simplex prime lens and greatly destroy much of its depth, bandwidth, saturation, and micro-contrast, which is so vital to black and white photography, and likewise its collective, multiplicative, excellent properties to render incredible true images with both pleasing contrast, depth, and more. What you're left with in this improved design, we've taken a prime lens, let's say with 6 elements, and you've dialed out all the crap that the measure baiters don't like. Well, we're going to double it. It's going to go from 6 elements to 12. What you're left with in this improved design, okay, which is not improved, since all lens design is a trade-off, and that's not my opinion, that's the position of Nikon, Zeiss, Fuji. Everybody makes fucking lenses, okay? They all will say the exact same thing in that regard that I've just said. What you've done, or what you're left with, is the same negative attributes and trade-offs of a zoom lens whose range also covers the same field of view as the newly designed prime lens. This then therefore becomes a useless prime lens with all the disadvantages of a zoom lens rendering and none of the remarkable advantages that make up an exquisite prime lens between 35 millimeters and up, which is so desirable and the reason why people pay so much damn money or excessive amounts of money to acquire the most perfect prime lens focal length that they want or need. An over-designed prime lens is literally the deconstruction of the very damn definition, i.e. the advantage, of a prime lens. It's like, why should I buy a prime lens? Why should I buy a 35 millimeter, really good 35 millimeter prime? I've already got a 24 to 70. And it's like, well, because it's a prime lens. Well, that's a circular argument. Why the hell should I buy a prime lens? Well, if it's been redesigned and it has all the negative attributes of a zoom lens, you should not. The only real advantage of a modern prime lens, and the old ones had the same advantage, doesn't matter if it's new prime lens or an old prime lens, the only advantage there now is the very shallow depth of field. It's like, well, that's really important, that's why I'm buying the prime lens. No, damn it! That's one reason. You got the shallow depth of field on old prime lenses. We are making them a little bit faster now. Not much. I got a lot of really fast old prime lenses. That's not the sole reason why you buy prime lenses for a fast aperture. Okay, a lot of other reasons. All lens design is a compromise. There's no exception to this rule. You cannot have extreme mobility, for example, and safety at the same time. For example, someone that's locked in the bottom of a bomb-proof bunker, is entirely safe with no mobility, obviously. Or you could have someone with incredible mobility, but which is at risk for lack of safety. You can't have the best of both worlds. Lens design's the same way. Over-designed and heavily damage-rendered modern prime lenses, 35 millimeters to 200 millimeter range, which is really the only deconstruction that's occurring in prime lenses today. They're working on the 300s next, of course. Are made manifest from lens manufacturers at the bequest and bemoaning of non-photographers, and these ever-measuring hobbyist idiots, The only thing they know how to do is, how sharp is it? 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 That's all these idiots say. That in an MTF chart. What's the MTF chart look like? What's the MTF chart look like? Yeah. These people are idiots. They don't know anything about the value of an exquisite image. I'm pretty sure photography is an effing art form. It's not the land of the measure baiter. If you're doing reproduction work of like fine art or reproduction macro work of like various, archaeological finds. That's the land of measure baiting photography, okay? Reproduction work and archaeological photography. Stuff where absolute scale and zero distortion and high resolution is incredibly important. The rest of that shit is the realm of art! These people know nothing about, like I said, exquisite images. They anguish over MTF charts and other attributes to measure in a lens. There's only 3 things in prime lens design that has improved over the past 50 years. Wide-angle resolution, and ultra-wide angle resolution and distortion improvements. Okay, that's number 1. Number 2, autofocus speed, tracking motor design. Yep. And in-lens image stabilization. Okay. Number 2 and number 3 have nothing to do with image output of a lens. In other words, if you stick it on a tripod, autofocus, who cares? Well, autofocus is important. We're not talking about autofocus being important or image stabilization, which it is. We're talking about the true native output of the lens. Why the hell would you buy an over-designed prime lens which renders all the shitty characteristics of a zoom lens? Now, if you talk to a fool, they will tell you, well, I really want that shallow depth of field. That is not the reason, girlfriend, that you buy a prime lens. It is one of the reasons. The big picture of why people, for decades and decades now have wanted prime lenses is because they're incredibly realistic rendering, bandwidth, saturation, micro contrast. I mean, if you're doing black and white photography and you don't know what the shit micro contrast is, then why don't you just stick your head in the belt sander? You're an idiot. It's like, I'm doing black and white. Why do my black and white photographs not look so good? I'm using the best camera. I'm using expensive prime lens. I said, what expensive prime lens are you using? And I've been asked this question to somebody. I'm using this new Sigma lens that has like 16 elements in it. I was like, there's your problem. That's why your black and white photos suck! I'm being humorous, but that's completely accurate. You can't get great intertonal value transmitted to your sensor to be recorded and converted, AD converter, SNR firmware, and then dropped on your car. That can't happen. Those intertonal values are not making its way to the sensor to be recorded. That's why the black and white photographs suck. See this little cute lens? It's only got 6 elements in it. Nikon still makes this lens. I heard from one Japanese person, and this is so damn funny, I almost pissed myself and rolled over and rolled up in a ball. He said all these new prime lenses that are over-designed, I think he actually used the word over-engineered. No, he used excessively engineered. He said those are lenses for the Gaijin market, which Gaijin market is kind of like the slanderous term used for stupid Americans and Europeans. It might only refer to Americans. But he said that these are Gaijin lenses. He may be right. I noticed that a lot of these lenses, which are very, very simplex, low element count lenses, which have the best rendering, the Japanese people are in love with them. It's like every time I go to a really simplex prime lens Flickr page, it's like all the people posting there are Japanese. They know what a really good lens is. And Americans and Europeans and Australians, you don't know. Canadians, you don't know. Why, it's a modern lens, it must be better. Says who, damn it? Says who? Anyway, the link is below. You can read it yourself. I want you to try to poke holes in it, and you have no chance of poking holes in it. But go ahead and try. I'd like to see you do it. Good luck with that one. It's bulletproof. It's irrefutable, too. But what do I know? I've only been screwing around with lenses now for decades, and, I've used every Nikkor lens made in the past 40 years, and I still own most of them. If you like this video, you drop a buck or two. Tell me to jump off a cliff. Whatever makes you happy. Bye.